Welcome to another edition of the Insider Mailbag. I'm Jerry Johnson, and this week it's Texas week. The Red Raiders open Big 12 play against the Longhorns, number 8 Longhorns. Both teams are 1-0, won their season openers, but boy, big difference in opinions of both teams coming away from the openers. Red Raiders beat Houston Baptist 35-33. Texas beat UTEP 59-3. 2 weeks ago. They each had a week off, so to speak, as in not playing last weekend. To get ready for the Big 12 opener on Saturday, which is scheduled for 2:30 p.m. Central Time at the Jones. I'm going to dive right into this round of mailbag questions. The first one comes from Raider Power 81, who wants to know, is the Big 12 using the new rapid result COVID test? He said it's supposed to give results in 15 minutes. And the Pac-12 is supposedly coming back the first week in November due to the availability of it. Now, I didn't memorize the name of this, but it is a 15-minute rapid results test, and the Big 12 did enter in a partnership earlier this month with Virtual Care for Families for this antigen testing rapid results deal that you're talking about, Raider Power 81. So, I mean, hey, I think the earlier you could find out the results, as long as they're accurate, of course, the better. So, yeah, they are using it. Texan 44 basically wants to know the history of David Yost, his coaching career. He wants a 30 for 30 on Yost, like a 5-minute, I guess, on David Yost. Now, I don't have that kind of production funding. I don't have that kind of funding going on here. But I tell you what, I am familiar, of course, with David Yost's history, and I was actually talking about this on a podcast for Horns 247 with Chip Brown about how much I respect David Yost. I know he's already got a lot of flack here since he's been at Tech, that people find his offense unimaginative, but I mean, you look back at his history, he's been highly successful. Yeah, he paid his dues, but he really made his bones at Missouri in the early aughts all the way. I think for about a dozen years, he came up coaching quarterbacks, eventually became the passing game coordinator, then the offense coordinator. He was also the recruiting coordinator. I mean, he worked his butt off at Missouri, had a lot of success. Brad Smith, I think, is a quarterback we all remember. I think he tuned up Tech once or twice in his career when they actually played. Those two teams played. And then Chase Daniels, another guy, who tore it up in the North Division there in the Big 12 for Missouri under David Yost. I mean, they were top 15 passing teams, top 12 passing teams, which was saying something for back then with Chase Daniel under Coach David Yost. And then, what's funny is he said that he actually took, he was working so much, and this wasn't a thing where, like, there was any kind of controversy, or he worked for Gary Pinkel in Missouri for a long time. Gary Pinkel did not want him to leave, but Yost, he didn't use the word burnout, but he had a young family, and he was, like I said, passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator, recruiting coordinator. That's a lot at a Power 5 school. And he stepped away for a year. And then when he went back, he worked at several places. Worked at Oregon. He was a passing game coordinator, worked with quarterbacks at Oregon. Worked with inside receivers under Mike Leach at Washington State. So some really great tutelage there. And all those offenses had a lot of success that David Yost was at. And then he took over as offensive coordinator at Utah State. And he took Utah State to, great heights. I mean, he was a semifinalist for the Broyles Award, which is given out to the top assistant coach in the country every year, in 2018. So just before he came to Texas Tech, because that offense, they were either led the country in scoring or were like second. They were really close. They were high up there. And of course, guys like Jordan Love, who got drafted by the Packers in the first round, all guys that, learned under David Yost's tutelage. So he's had some really good quarterbacks he's worked with. He's had tremendous success everywhere he's been at. And I tell you what, here's another thing about David Yost I find really interesting. Everybody knows about his hair, right? Everybody knows he looks like Harry from Dumb and Dumber. And, when you talk to him, yeah, Yost is quirky, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's very much like Leach in that he wore like some sandals to a press conference one time, like the season opening press conference one time. Like, you just get the idea he's just off the beach, But really, when you talk to him, he is very detail-oriented, very interesting, very sharp when he's talking football, at least. I haven't talked a whole lot off topic with him, but in talking football, I've been very impressed with David Yost. And he mentioned his hair. Why he started doing that was so that he would stand out in recruiting, And, you think, okay, is that too much of a quirk? But I can't tell you how many times I've been talking to a recruit and I'm asking about Texas Tech, but I'm asking him about his overall recruitment as well. And he'll say, and this was when recruiting was open, when there's a bunch of coaches coming through their schools, and he'll say, yeah, we had 4 or 5 guys. I can't remember the name of all these coaches, but I remember Coach Yost because of his hair. So there's something to that. And I'll tell you another thing about recruiting that really stands out to me, just a personal story of mine with Coach Yost, is that I remember they make the coordinators available under Matt Wells, and that's something actually Coach Wells and I talked about when he first came, in that he didn't he thinks that they should be held accountable by the media, that who else is going to answer those questions for why they did what they did scheme-wise? Now, he can, but those guys would rather, Coach Yost and Coach Patterson, the coordinators, would rather answer the questions directly themselves instead of have somebody else answer for them. So, which makes a ton of sense to me. And so I had an opportunity to ask Coach Yost about recruiting, just his philosophy, how he goes about recruiting quarterbacks, right? The all-important position of quarterback. And there's several things that he looks for, but one thing that really stood out was that he said that he'll target one guy, all right? And that's his philosophy, and he goes all in, and really tries to, to get him. And that's not, that may not sound that crazy to y'all, but, and it may not sound crazy if you're at Alabama or Clemson or Ohio State, but Texas Tech, even Cliff Kingsbury, who's, some people have labeled him as the quarterback whisperer, who certainly has had a lot of success with quarterbacks. He would get down to his 12th or 14th or 15th option on the recruiting trail. So to go all in on one guy is risky, to say the least. But the first guy he really, they brought in Donovan Smith, was the guy they knew they were going to bring in. But the first quarterback, first class was this current one, 2021, that hasn't signed yet. And their first top target, really the only guy this coaching staff has has offered from that 2021 class, was Baron Morton, a top 100 guy, 4-star guy. He hasn't signed yet, but he's committed. He's doing everything to get ready to be on campus by December, already studying the Texas Tech playbook. Top 100, Elite 11 guy. You could argue he's the highest rated quarterback that Tech has signed since the 70s. Really, certainly the modern recruiting area. And of course, they did sign Pat Mahomes, who turned out to be a pretty good addition there. But you get what I'm saying. For him to say he has that strategy at Texas Tech and to land the first guy or the first class, I was impressed. And you ask Baron Morton, yeah, he's from Lubbock. There's a lot of tie-ins. He's from West Texas, and his family, his dad, of course, who's his coach there at Eastland High School. But the first thing Barron will tell you why he's going to Texas Tech is David Yost. That's it. After that, there's a lot of other things, but he loves David Yost. That's his favorite coach, favorite guy who's recruiting, loves the system. And man, what a huge get on the recruiting trail. So I look for, once Coach Yost, assuming he gets the time, could really add his personnel to this roster, I look for this offense to take off, and it'd be not that it's so crazy, but it is a good offense. I know the tight end, the addition of the tight end instead of another slot receiver drives some people crazy, but there are some tie-ins that are very important and integral to what he wants to do in the running game. So I feel like it will work. They need to get the right personnel in, and once they do, and once everybody gets familiar with the system, it takes a couple years, it does, then I really think this offense is going to be very good once again. Trust me when I say this, they got a good one in David Yost, and I hope they can hold on to him as long as possible. All right, next question comes from Tech 2010, who says, if it is just street racing, do you expect him to play still on Saturday? And this question was asked before Texas Tech announced it, but we're talking about SaRodorick Thompson, who was arrested on a misdemeanor warrant. It stemmed from a June incident. Caden Leggett was arrested at the time. Street racing. Now, and I've talked about this on prior videos earlier this week. I'm not going to judge one way or the other. It's a misdemeanor. Caden Leggett wasn't punished severely in terms of playing time, and certainly SaRodorick Thompson, one of the best players on the team, starting running back, ran for 118 yards, 2 touchdowns on the opener, led the team 765 yards, 12 touchdowns on the ground last season. They're not going to punish him harder than they punished Caden Leggett, I'll tell you that. And I would be shocked if they did. He may not start, but he's going to play a lot. SaRodorick Thompson is. Even though this has been said, some people miss it, I wanted to go ahead and address this again. SaRodorick will play, and I expect him to play well, to be quite honest. This is another question from Raider Power 81, and the reason why I'm answering 2 of these is because he has a couple of good ones this week. And this one's a recruiting question. He said, JJ, generally, is it easier to recruit high caliber players to a position that you've historically been good at, like receiver at Texas Tech, that he might have to wait for playing time? Or is it easier to recruit to a position that you can show a recruit you need immediate help at, like defensive back, that will allow early playing time? He says, in my tenure at Tech, what Texas Tech coach do I consider to be the best at each of these? Well, I'll tell you what. Wide receiver is the easiest position to recruit at Texas Tech, there's no doubt. But a close second here, just here recently, is the linebacker. And I think you're seeing that. This last recruiting cycle, Texas Tech, it's hard for me to imagine them recruiting any better than they have the linebacker position. And it's a good example of showing success, right? And receivers too. They brought in a great receiving class. So at positions where Texas Tech has had a lot of success, this coaching staff has had a lot of success on the recruiting trail. You look at Krishawn Merriweather, a junior college edition. All right, he was Big 12 Player of the Week. In Tech's first game, he was all over the place. He was a junior college All-American they brought in. Specifically, he told me because look, he knows they have a need for playing time and the success they have with Jordan Brooks. So a little bit of both there. All right. Colin Schooler, grad transfer. Boom. He came in because he knows he can play. Also, same thing. The system. Keith Patterson took Jordan Brooks, who I've liked for a long time. You asked Joe on the board, Joe Yeager. I've thought that Jordan, I love Jordan's style. Thought he was just, he needed some things to come together for him and stay healthy and that he could really flourish. Under Keith Patterson's system, which is designed to unleash the linebackers, Jordan flourished. He went from not being really on anybody's draft radar. The idea was that he'd probably be an undrafted free agent and get on somewhere, to being drafted by the Seattle Seahawks in the first round. And, oh, by the way, reports came out this week, he's expected to start against the Cowboys this weekend. And what's funny is Jordan and I'm a womb to the tomb Cowboy fan. I mean, my dad grew up in South Oak Cliff, sold programs at the very first Cowboy game. He grew up in the shadow of the Cotton Bowl. I mean, we're my whole family are just diehard Cowboy fans. I'm going to be a Cowboy fan till the day I die, no matter what happens. So Jordan Brooks felt that way before entering the NFL. Obviously, he's taken on the Cowboys this week. So I know I'm getting off track here, but I found that interesting that his first start is against. I mean, he was as big of a Cowboy fan as I was with our talks, off the record there. So it'll be interesting. That's got to be a really special moment for Jordan. So I'm excited for him. But going back to your question, I think for me, it depends on the player. And people always ask, they want like a broad answer. What do recruits value the most? And I think most of the time, what I'd say the 2 things that players want the most is they want to go to the NFL, they want to go pro, and they want to win. So obviously, you're not going pro if you're not getting playing time. And you're probably not, and if you go to a place that's historically had a lot of success with that position, that'll also help you go to the league, So, I think it's a little bit of both, and it depends on what the recruit wants. It's really amazing how different the desires and the wants are of certain guys. I think you'd be kind of surprised at what people care about, and how different it is. So I'll say, to answer your question, I'll say a lot of the guys that Tech have gotten historically in my time have been for playing time. But then I think is also, it's obvious that it's easy to recruit receivers historically for Texas Tech, or here recently this century. And then linebackers right now under Keith Patterson because of his scheme and success with Jordan. So there's you look at Derek Lewis, like I said, Colin Schooler, Brandon Randall, grad transfer came in. Jacob Morgenstern, another linebacker. Like I said, Krishawn Merriweather. I mean, this is crazy. It's a lot more talent than they had in like several recruiting cycles, and they hit it from every, the transfer portal, high school recruiting, junior college. So that all stems from the success they have with Jordan Brooks last season. So in terms of capital, like which coaches have capitalized on those two in those two areas the most, I'm going to tip the cap to Coach Patterson already. I know he's not. I'm giving a lot of love to the coordinators, and man, y'all aren't feeling the coordinators right now. But Coach Keith Patterson, at least in recruiting, has done a great job in terms of capitalizing on the success he had with Jordan Brooks. And it's not just him. Coach Cosgrove helped. Other guys on the staff helped. But make no mistake, it's Keith Patterson's impact with the scheme and with Jordan Brooks, because he was a linebackers coach with Jordan Brooks. And Jordan Brooks gives Coach Patterson a lot of credit publicly for helping him and help transform him. But I got to tip the cap, because you can tip the cap to every receivers coach we've had here, honestly, in that regard. So take your pick on that side of the ball. Now, in terms, and I think this is really going to surprise some folks, but in terms of who I think's done the best offering playing time, I'm going to go with Lee Hayes. Go back a couple offensive line coaches. He brought in, I don't know if it was 2015, but I think it was that. He brought in a really salty class, some guys that started for years. All the Travis Bruffys, the Steels, the Massac Nanu, who they kept trying to replace him and they couldn't. He started for 4 years, so those kind of guys. And there's so many highly rated guys that just got some kind of injury bug or whatever that could have been, stars. And he was primarily, he was pitching the system, but also playing time. So, because they had some veterans that came in, the Jared Casters, the Ravens, the Morales brothers that came in and were gone, and they had a hole there. They had some playing time to offer him. He did a really good job in that regard. And then, of course, they let him go. But he did a good job of bringing those guys in. All right, final question comes from RJM2186. He says, doom and gloom question. Oh, boy. What would you expect in terms of immediate fallout and changes if Tech suffers a really bad blowout loss to Texas on Saturday? He says, is Patterson gone? Is Bowman replaced by Columbia or Maverick McIver at quarterback? What about Wells losing the locker room? Well, he has another question here, but let me answer this first one. I don't think there's going to be any fallout. Tech is last I saw, Tech was an 18-point underdog at home. So, Vegas expects them to get blown out by more than 2 touchdowns, by 3 possessions, which is a record in terms of Texas being favored in Lubbock. And some of that might be the fact that there's only going to be 25% capacity crowd, so you're not going to have, the raucous Red Raider Nation crowd breathing down UT's necks. But I think part of it is that they see a mismatch there with Texas and Tech. I don't think Tech's going to get blown out by that much. But if they are, I don't think they're just, people are going to call for immediate firings. But, the guy, they haven't been here, 2 years? You got to give him some time to rebuild this thing. I think Patterson is who I would look for in terms of who would be first to go. I think that's the guy. If there was going to be somebody to go, it would be Patterson in terms of the coordinators or the coach. Now, Alan Bowman, look, I think people need to understand that unless he gets hurt or his helmet comes off or something, unless Tech is forced to play somebody else, Alan Bowman's the guy. From what I've heard, it hasn't even been close. So maybe they might bring in Columbia to shake things up, or MacGyver. The word is Columbia is number 2 if they have to play him, but that there's a wide chasm between Bowman and the number 2 guys. So that's the last I heard. We'll see if that continues to be the case. If maybe Columbia and MacGyver come on, or if Bowman is ineffective, but Bowman's a guy. So I wouldn't expect him to be replaced anytime soon unless he's unable to go, physically. All right, and then in terms of Wells losing the locker room, no, I don't think so. Not for getting blown out by Texas this week. And then the next question is, in addition to that, if there's no sign of improvement for the rest of the season, and I'm Kirby Hocutt, what changes would I make during the offseason to get this program back on track? I've already said how much I respect Coach Yost, so I hope they can hold on to him as long as possible. And I think he needs time to instill his system, to match the personnel, and even with the personnel he has, to get them, ready to go and really run his system. It's been 13 games, all right? Been 13 games. before this Texas game. That's all they've played under this current program now, or current regime. Now, there have been some in-game decisions under Wells that I really have been disappointed in. There's just no two ways about it. I mean, they lost four games? Either 3 or 4 games last year. I can't keep it together. Either 3 or 4 games last year by less than 3 points. And some of those were bad plays made by the players, bad luck. Some of it was bad decisions by the coaches. I really want to see the Coach Wells and his coaching staff help the fellas win some games maybe they shouldn't, instead of lose some games they shouldn't. But I wouldn't. I guess if they lost every game the rest of the season, then they might have to clean house. But boy, I don't think that's going to happen, and I really want to see some continuity. I want to see what they can do. They're trying to build a foundation. I by no means have given up on this coaching staff like some have. I think we need to give them some more time. Now, some people don't want to hear that, but I think after this year, if they struggle this year, I think you start saying, okay, you better start turning around by year 3. And then if we don't see some clear signs of improvement by year 3, then I'm like, okay, all right. Then we got to start thinking about possibly making some changes. Now, Patterson, I think, like I said, it's not that I dislike him, because I don't necessarily, but his defense needs to at least seem to look like they know what they're doing, which they didn't in the opener, and they didn't sometimes last year. So that would be the first place I would go to. But all that being said, like I said, at least after the first game, and Tech's still undefeated, I'd like to see some continuity there at Tech and see what they can do under the current regime. But man, already some more intense questions. Big 12 play starting. I'm sure there'll be plenty more after Texas Tech and Texas face off, and that's assuming they do. I do believe they're going to. And I want to end this mailbag again like I did last week and just say I'm so thankful that it looks like they're going to play. I got my credential, and I'm ready. I'm ready to go see what unfolds at the Jones on the field on Saturday. So with that, I want to thank you for all your great questions, and until next time.